I remember the day I first saw my mother-in-law's wedding dress. It was neatly sealed in a plastic garment bag, tucked away in a cedar closet in her Victorian-style house in upstate New York. The house itself smelled of aged wood and lavender, but the moment she unzipped that bag, the pungent scent of decades-old lace and mothballs overpowered the lavender. I stared in reluctant awe at the dress, off-white with yellowed trims and stiff lace sleeves that ballooned out in a distinctly 1980s style. It was a dress of a bygone era, definitely not what I'd envisioned for my own wedding, yet for my mother-in-law it was an heirloom steeped in tradition. She said she'd worn it with pride, just as her mother had before her. It was, in her words, a symbol of family unity. I tried my best to smile. My fiancé Ben was standing behind her, arms folded. His face was unreadable. "Isn't it gorgeous?" my mother-in-law cooed, gently lifting a crinkled sleeve. "You'll look stunning in it." I fumbled for words. "It's very vintage. It's definitely got character." But the truth was, I already had my own dress in mind, one I'd carefully selected with my best friend weeks ago. It was a modern mermaid silhouette with lace detailing that made me feel both elegant and entirely myself. I couldn't imagine giving that up, even for the sake of family unity. Over dinner that night, the subject came up again. My mother-in-law recounted the sentimental history of the dress, how her own mother had sewn tiny pearls into the sleeves, how it had survived 2 major storms, how she'd prayed for Ben's future bride while mending a tear in the train many years ago. At the end of her nostalgic speech, she clasped her hands expectantly. "So, you'll wear it, right?" She didn't phrase it as a question so much as an assertion of fact. Ben, who had mostly listened quietly, shot me a glance, his eyes pleading for me to go along. Something knotted in my stomach. "I'm really sorry," I said, trying to be gentle but firm. "I've already found my dream gown. I appreciate your generosity, but it doesn't feel right for me." My mother-in-law's face dropped, and an awkward hush fell over the table. Even the air conditioner's hum seemed to pause out of courtesy for the tension. That evening, Ben confronted me in the guest room. "What's the big deal?" he asked, frustration evident in his voice. "My mom's only dream has been to pass down this dress. She's been talking about it since I was a kid." I explained how I had imagined walking down the aisle in something that reflected my own style, not in a piece of family history that frankly didn't suit me at all. I added gently that I respected their tradition. I just didn't want to wear that particular dress. Our conversation escalated from tense to heated. He accused me of being selfish, and I countered that he was being inconsiderate of my feelings. The night ended with Ben storming off to his childhood bedroom. I woke the next day to find him packing our belongings. He refused to look me in the eye, muttering something about not letting me hurt his mother. I couldn't believe what was happening. This was a man who, a year ago, had knelt on one knee under a canopy of Christmas lights, promising to love and honour me in all things. Now he was so furious about a dress that he insisted we cut our visit short and head back to our apartment in Manhattan. The drive was silent, the tension so thick it felt like we were towing it behind the car.
13.
Back at our apartment, he told me he needed time to think. Days went by without us sharing more than a few words. Wedding planning halted. My dream gown remained on hold at the boutique, but I didn't have the emotional energy to go for another fitting. My friends and bridesmaids reached out, but I gave them only vague responses, too embarrassed to admit our wedding was now in jeopardy. The next weekend, Ben told me he wanted me to move out for a while. He said he couldn't trust me to respect his family if I wouldn't honour his mother's one request. I was dumbfounded. I'd never expected him to take it this far. Hurt and furious, I packed a suitcase and moved in with my best friend Gina. The first few days in her spare room felt surreal. I replayed every conversation, every look Ben had given me. How had an issue about a wedding dress escalated into a near breakup? Gina tried to console me, saying that weddings have a strange way of bringing out the worst in people, especially families. Tradition can be a beautiful thing, she mused, but it shouldn't come at the expense of your individuality. Days turned into a week, and then 2. Ben rarely texted, and when he did, it was cold and brief, asking about logistical matters like the electric bill or whether I'd cancelled the florist. I felt alone and betrayed. The wedding we'd spent months planning was hanging by a thread, all because of a dress that I couldn't bring myself to wear. I tried to reason with him, suggesting compromises, like using some lace from his mother's dress as part of my bouquet wrap. He wouldn't budge. In his eyes, I was rejecting not just the dress, but also everything his family stood for. Eventually, Gina convinced me to see a therapist. In those sessions, I realized that maybe the dress was a catalyst for a deeper issue, a warning sign that Ben and I weren't communicating our needs, and that he might value his mother's approval over my happiness. My therapist suggested couples counselling, but Ben refused to go. His mother still held the dress out like a peace offering that was anything but peaceful. To her, this was about carrying on the family legacy. To me, it felt like losing my identity. One night, as I lay awake on Gina's living room couch, an epiphany struck me. A wedding is supposed to be about 2 people declaring their love, not about satisfying someone else's traditions at any cost. If I had to sacrifice my own sense of self just to keep the peace, what kind of marriage would that be? I decided then and there that I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't wear a dress that made me feel trapped, and I wouldn't marry a man who cared more about his mother's demands than my comfort and happiness. That morning I called Ben. My voice trembled as I told him I would not be returning unless he was willing to respect my choices. "This marriage has to be about us," I said. "Both of us." Silence lingered on the line. Then he said, "Well, you know what you have to do." His meaning was clear. Wear the dress or there's no wedding. I let out a slow, shaky breath. Then there's no wedding. It hurt more than I'd ever imagined it could, but also felt like the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. I hung up before my tears betrayed me. Walking away was heartbreaking, but I felt a strange sense of liberation. I might have lost a fiancé, but I'd stood by my principles. That day I went back to the boutique, tried on my dream gown one last time, and told the consultant I would not be needing it after all. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, feeling a pang of loss, but also for the first time in a long while, a surge of self-respect. I left the boutique with my head held high, uncertain of what the future held, but sure of one thing: no dress, no tradition, and no relationship was worth abandoning myself. And in the end, that realization was more powerful than any wedding vow could ever be. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting videos every day.